Okay, hi, this is Alona, and I'm going to be explaining how to solve a quadratic equation by completing the square. And this is for an Algebra 2 and Trig student. So, there are three ways to solve a quadratic equation, one of them being factoring, and one of them being using the quadratic equation. When an equation can't factor and you don't remember the quadratic formula, completing the square is a great option. So there are two types of quadratic formulas, as you probably know. We have ones that look like this, with 1 as the leading coefficient, and we have ones that look like this, with a number other than 1 as the leading coefficient. In this case, it's 2. So I'm going to be teaching you how to solve quadratic equations both ways, with 1 as the leading coefficient and with a number like 2 or 3. So let's get started. So we're going to do this one first. So step 1 says to divide by leading coefficient A. Well, since leading coefficient A is 1, we can skip that step for this one, but we'll have to do it later for this one. So it's important to know what A, B, and C are. So in this case, A is going to be the number in front of x squared, which is 1. B is going to be the number in front of x, which is negative 8. You take the negative along with it. And C is 13. So step 1, we don't have to do. Step 2 is move C to the other side. C in this case is 13, so we're going to take C, which is 13, and subtract it. And get x squared minus 8x equals negative 13. We're going to leave a gap here, and you'll see why in 1 second. So step 3 says take half of b, square it, and then add that number to both sides. So that might seem complicated, but it's not when you break it down. So b in this case is negative 8. We're going to take negative 8 divided by 2 and get negative 4, and then square that. And since negative 4 times negative 4, 16, that's what essentially step 3 is asking for. So we're going to take that number and add it to both sides. That's why I left the gap. And so now we have that perfect square that we wanted. So now we can factor that easily and get x minus 4 equals 3. Since x minus 4 is the same, you can just take that and combine it to x minus 4 squared equals 3. So now we want to take the square root of both sides. And why? Because we want to get rid of that squared. And the way to get rid of that squared is to take the square root. And you would get x minus 4 equals rad 3. Oh, but don't forget a plus or minus, because once you put a square root over a number, you have to put a plus or a minus. So now we're going to add 4, because we're going to solve for x, as step 6 dictates. And you would get x equals 4 plus or minus rad 3 as your answer. So we're going to move on to the second one now. So we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do step 1 this time, which is divide by leading coefficient A. In this case, it's 2, so we're going to just take 2 and divide it to all the numbers to get x squared minus 6x minus 5 equals 0. So now we have an equation that looks very similar to the one that we started with on this side. So step 2 says to move c to the other side. And now we're going to take half of b squared, which is negative 3 squared, which is 9. So we're going to add 9 to both sides. And now we have that perfect square again. So instead of writing x minus 3 2 times, and a quick trick for this one, you can just take half of b to factor it. We're just going to put this squared, and we're going to get 14. So same thing, we want to get rid of this squared right here, so we're going to take the square root. Get x minus 3 equals, make sure to put the plus or minus, rad 14. Then we're going to add 3 to both sides and get x equals 3 plus or minus rad 14. Now you could of course take it and do 3 plus rad 14 and 3 minus rad 14. Or you can just leave it this way because it's just easier. How are we doing on time? Oh, Perfect. So we're going to do one more equation, and this is going to be the hardest of them all because it has a fraction. Everybody hates fractions, but luckily for us, we have a beautiful calculator and the math to frac key. So I'm going to just flip this over so we can have more room. So the equation that we're going to use, let me get out my big pen, is 3x squared minus 6x minus 7 equals 0. So we're going to just follow the rules. Divide by leading coefficient, which is 3. Minus 7/3 equals 0. That looks disgusting, but that's okay, because when we have to add it later, we have a math to frac key. Minus 2x, we're going to leave the gap, and we're going to get 7/3. So now we're going to take negative 2 divided by 2, and pretty soon, once you get used to it, you'll be able to do this in your head. To get negative 1 squared, which is just 1. Add 1 to both sides. So now we're going to have to add, after we factor it, we're going to have to add 7/3 and 1. And many people cannot do this in their head. But luckily, as Algebra 2 and Trig students, we have a calculator that we can use. So we'll just type 7/3 plus 1, which is 3.3. And you can either leave it like that or use the math to frac key and get negative 10/3. Or just 10/3, sorry. Just like that. And that's it. So now we just keep going. Take the squared. Good. Take the squared, square root, get x minus 1 equals rad 10 over 3. And what are we forgetting? Plus or minus, that's right. And then we're going to add 1 and get x equals 1 plus or minus rad 10 over 3. I hope this was helpful. So just to recap, we have equations that look like this with the coefficient of 1. We have equations that look like this with 2 or 4 or 6, and we get nice even numbers. And then we get ones like this that we have fractions. And I hope this was helpful. Thank you.